And all right. It is Friday, October 27th, 2023, and I am here in Woods Hole, Massachusetts with my colleague Pat McPherson. I'm Susan Creighton, and together we are a small business called Nerdus, and we're working with the Marlboro Morris Ale Committee to create an archival collection of the first 50 years of the Marlboro Morris Ale and hopefully beyond. And we've been enjoying the opportunity to go interview various folks who we feel have a part of the story of the ale to tell us. And we're sitting here today with Tim Radford in his home in Woods Hole, Massachusetts. So, Tim, would you just get to say your name so we can hear your voice to start off with?
Tim Radford, here in Woods Hole, Massachusetts.
Lovely. And Pat, would you say your name?
This is Pat, and I'm sitting with Susan and Tim.
Great. All right. Awesome. Thank you. So we want to get around to asking you some questions related to the Marlboro Ale, but what we always like to start out with is just getting a little context for you and your introduction to the world of dance. So could you start us way back at the beginning, back in England, I'm presuming, when
Yes.
you first encountered Morris dancing, and where did you grow up, and how did you first stumble on Morris dancing?
Okay, I was born in the village of Totton, which is outside Southampton on the south coast of England. I first was introduced to Morris dancing when I was a 9-year-old at school, at our primary school in Totton. We had a guy who played pipe and tabor for the Winchester Morris Men, who were, I can't remember exactly what their date was, but he was a founding member of the Winchester Morris Men, and he played pipe and tabor and taught us Morris dancing and country dancing at school. I hated it.
Did you?
I preferred to dance country dances that he taught us because we could dance with the girls.
Oh.
We weren't allowed to dance with the girls when we were doing Morris. So I did it for 2 years until I left, went to senior school at age 11. I did it for 2 years there, mainly country dancing, not much Morris.
Okay.
But at least I was introduced to it, and I had a couple of friends who were very involved in it at the time. In fact, one of my best friends was one of the best dancers on the team.
Oh, who was that?
His name is Ray Cooper.
Okay.
We just recently made contact in the last year again after many, many years of never seeing each other.
Oh,
So,
lovely.
and it came about because I was doing some research on the, I wanted to do some research on the boys' team that existed there and who was on it.
Oh.
And I was managed to find, through another colleague on the Winchester Morris Men, or a friend on the Winchester Morris Men, a picture of them dancing.
Wow.
This was a boys' Cotswold team?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And we found a picture of them. And Mr. Batchin, that's the name of the guy who was the pipe and tabor player, who I learnt until very recently was still alive, much to my surprise.
Wow.
So I don't know how old he is.
Yeah.
So I don't know how old he ever was.
Yeah.
Anyway, I did country dancing with him mainly, and that was my introduction to Morris dance. Then when I started at the senior school at age 11, there was nothing. So I sort of gave it up.
Okay.
I didn't do any more. And then in my latest teens and older, I became interested in folk music and folk song and was in a folk group. And I've been a singer all my life. And I met other dancers and was asked by a friend of mine who I used to see on a regular basis. In fact, his wife, Helen, was my singing partner for a while before I moved from Hampshire.
What was your folk group?
The folk group was called Breckenridge.
Okay. And you were singing folk songs of
Yes,
the day? Or, okay.
I was singing songs. Mainly at that time, English and American stuff.
Okay.
It was what was it? 1970, 1969, 1970.
So were you going for kind of the Woody Guthrie kind of
Well,
repertoire?
I don't know. I really didn't know much about
English folk
it.
song,
It was whatever songs we could find and they could play.
Yeah.
The biggest problem,
Right.
and I'd been in a rock band earlier than that because I was singing at work one day and a guy came, and I was an apprentice, and a young guy who worked in part of the same company, but not the same part as us, came up and said, "Hey, you're a good singer. Have you ever thought of being in a band?" And he recruited me to be in a band.
Wow.
And I was in a rock band. I don't remember the dates, frankly. They've sort of
that's okay.
fizzed out.
Right.
But the rock
Teenage years.
rock band was called the Ravons, featuring Raving Mad Radford.
I love it.
That was me. So I'd been a singer.
R-A-V-E-O-N.
Yeah. So I'd been a singer all my life. I was in the school choirs and operas and stuff like that.
Okay.
And then I said I got into folk music, and then I started meeting people who were doing country dancing and Morris dancing, and I started going to a few things with my first wife. But before that, before I met my first wife, really. We ran a folk club at our youth club, because the folk group was part of the youth club that I was in.
Right. Yeah.
And we ran a folk evening, and a guy from the village came along as one of the singers, and he was semi-professional, and he got to be my mentor. His name was David Williams. He was a wonderful musician and singer. And he said, "You're wasted singing this stuff.
Wow.
You should be singing much better stuff than this." So he said, "Come around my house." So I sort of was a little bit concerned, but I went round in his house, met him and his wife, and he played me Harry Cox and Sam Larner, and introduced me to the Hammond and Gardner collections of folk music from Dorset and Hampshire.
Oh, wow.
And all these songs that were collected in the villages that I knew,
Wow.
that were known to me.
Yeah.
So I got really interested in singing. And one of the things I'd always had a problem with the band was that they could never play in the tune, in the keys that I wanted to sing in.
Oh, no.
So I started singing unaccompanied. And so I learnt from that, and then this sort of went on for a while. And then I met this couple. I became her singing partner. Helen Woodard was her name, and we became a singing partnership. And we used to go to this folk dance club in Cadnam in the New Forest, and we used to sing. We used to dance, and then we used to have an interval, and Helen and I used to sing a song or two. And Alf, who's funny enough, we all knew him as Elf, but his real name was John, and he was called Elf because that was a nickname he got at school because he was short.
Oh.
So it was really ELF.
Oh.
But he was, everyone knew him as Elf, ALF, and he's still called Elf Woodall today.
Oh, that's funny.
And very few people know his real name is John.
Right.
But that's the way it goes. And yeah, so we started, and he said, I was going to some folk clubs in the south of England as well, predominantly the Folksall Folk Club in Southampton, where I became a resident singer, and also to a couple of clubs along the south coast, one in Christchurch, which is now not in Hampshire at all, it's now in Dorset.
Oh.
With reorganisation in 1977, they moved to the county. My wife wants to say something.
Spelling of Folksall, just for the transcript?
Yes. Oh.
I'd have to think about it. I'll have to
on
write
a
it.
on a ship.
Yeah.
We didn't say forecast.
Forecast.
The way it's the way it's conflated. So it's got FO
C
apostrophe S L apostrophe E or something like that.
Okay,
I'll have to
That
find
sounds
out for you.
familiar. I've seen that
I'm
before.
just writing down the words.
Yeah.
To go back and check.
And the folks,
Ask later.
the Folks was a folk club is still running in Southampton. It's been in about 10 different locations since I sang there, but it's still in existence.
I always thought it was Folksall, like FOLK was the first part of the word.
Like, oh, yeah.
Well, it's sort of
Yeah.
a pun on the name.
Yeah.
Really. Anyway, that's been going since 1962.
Yeah. So, Tim, you did not grow up in a family that already had some kind of Morris dance tradition or
No.
familiarity. This was you.
My
were the
dad
first
was
one.
my dad was the greatest singer no one ever heard.
Ah. Okay.
He had a fabulous voice,
Yeah.
but never really did anything with it much after. Well, I guess after I was about 10, He used to sing in socials. He worked in Southampton Docks, and he used to sing at socials that they used to have, and was always the sort of the leading guy running everything.
Yeah.
And that was before he even started working in the docks, because our family has always had people who've worked in the Southampton Docks. My uncle was a foreman crane driver, and my dad became a crane driver.
Oh wow.
But he was great, and I have leaflets, programs of when he was in the army during the war. That they did socials, and it said the sketch and so and so. Driver Radford will sing. Driver Radford will sing, and he did that. That was the only music we ever had in our house.
Yeah.
We had no books in our house. I lived in a house that had no books.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
My mum couldn't sing her way out of a paper bag.
Oh my.
She was terrible. My
Yeah.
sister has no musical ability, but
Interesting.
my dad was a great
took after
singer.
your dad.
Yeah. Quite by the by.
Yeah.
He only ever taught me 2 songs, and I could never really get much out of him about some of the songs he used to sing.
Huh.
But that's the way it was. That's the way he was.
Right.
He was we had a on-off relationship.
Yeah.
I think he wanted me to be a great sportsman,
Oh yeah.
and I wasn't.
You had other interests.
Well, I wasn't.
Yeah.
After the age of 11, I couldn't see beyond the length of my arm very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although I did play sports, I was best at rugby because you didn't need to see anything.
That's right. Right.
So we had nothing in the house, and it wasn't until I went to school, and as I said, I sang in the school choir. I was in Gilbert and Sullivan operas, and then I started singing with a friend later at the youth club.
Okay.
Anyway, we met Dave Williams, and he said, there's other things you can sing. So I started with that. That started me meeting more people, and I said meeting Alf Woodall, and we formed the Morris team in Christchurch, which was new at the time, and that was called Twynham Morris.
Okay.
Twynham is the ancient name for Christchurch.
Oh wow.
It's Twywnham. I think that's right.
Okay.
Twynnham.
H-A-M. Okay.
And we started in one of the back rooms at the pubs where the folk club used to have.
Ah.
So I started dancing there, and
And who was teaching? Who knew enough
well.
about it to teach you all?
I had my biggest influence as far as teaching was concerned was a very good friend of mine by the name of Steve Jordan,
Okay.
who danced with Winchester Morris.
Okay.
And also there was a guy who danced on the other local team, which was Bourne River Morris, and his name was
Bourne River.
his name was his name was it's just gone. I know it.
You'll think of it as soon
I
as
think
you
I
stop
think
trying.
I think of it.
Yeah.
And we started going to workshops, and I met Roy Dommett.
Okay.
And went to some of Roy's workshops, Tubby Reynolds' workshops, Roy Dommett workshops, and wherever we could, we found out things.
Right.
It's on the tip of my tongue, this guy's name.
Mm.
The other guy was Clive North, who was another Bourne River Morris Man. He was another one who taught us. Dickon. Can I remember what Dickon's first surname was? I can't. I've got it written down. I've got it all written down somewhere. And he started teaching us some basics. And we started learning dances first from Headington.
Oh, okay.
And then sort of moving on from that.
Yeah.
And learning other dances that largely now I've forgot because I haven't done them for so many years.
Right.
And then I married my first wife, Annie Pitt as she was, Anne Radford. She died last September.
Oh, okay.
We were still good friends,
Oh, good.
which was very good, and good for my kids as well.
Yeah.
And she played concertina.
Did she? Oh, wonderful. Okay.
Dave
she
Williams.
was team musician?
She played piano. and she was interested in playing the concertina. And my friend Dave Williams managed to find one in a shop in Bournemouth, an English concertina, which we bought for £10
Wow.
in 1970 or 1971.
Wow.
And we sent it to Crab in London,
Yep.
and he charges £10 for retuning it and reconditioning in it.
Get it fixed up.
And she played it. It was an odd machine. It would obviously, we think it was a Salvation Army machine, concertina,
Oh, quite.
because it only
possibly.
had short bellows. It only had 4-fold bellows.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But it didn't matter. She could still play it.
Have you
And
ever told this story to Doug?
I
Just as
don't
an
think I
aside,
have actually.
He would love to hear this.
I don't think
That's
I
for
have.
later. Okay.
Anyway, it was wooden-ended English. I've got the number somewhere, and I keep on meaning to look in the archive if I haven't about when it was made. But so anyway, by the way, my daughter still plays it.
Oh, wonderful.
And there's another story about that too.
Okay.
So we started the Morris team. She was playing concertina, and Helen, my singing partner, was playing piano accordion. And we started learning dances, and we danced. We danced in Christchurch Folk Festival and different places around. And there was only 8 of us.
Wow.
And
And is this early 70s now?
this was early. There's a time in my life from sort of 65 up to 72 when I got married, which is foggy.
It's in there somewhere. Okay,
It's in there somewhere.
okay, good enough.
72 I got married.
Okay.
So I was dancing then, and I think my first recollection of actually dancing out on a tour was with the Winchester Morris Men on their tour of the New Forest on on the August Bank Holiday Monday, and I think it was 1970.
Okay.
If it
So
wasn't,
we're-
it was 69. If it wasn't, it was 71.
We're plus or minus 70. Okay, fair enough.
If you look, I guess if you looked at a calendar to see what the Bank Holiday Monday was on any of those days, it was on a Saturday. So
I'm just curious because it's interesting to hear how it sounds like in England there was being sort of a Morris folk revival
there was.
at about the same time, or maybe just a little bit ahead.
Well,
of
I
when
had
it
some
started
theories
happening.
about that as well,
Okay,
but that's beside
yeah.
the point.
Yeah.
Up until a certain time in England, Morris was largely the province of colleges
Oh,
or offshoots from colleges,
yeah.
and it was run very much like a college club.
Interesting.
And the term squire and foreman and everything, well, the squire and bagman was something that came out of that. It didn't actually really exist in the old Morris
Yeah.
situation. You did have the ragman and the bagman, and you had the foreman. You didn't have the squire as such. That's something that came out of the. Well, as education grew in England, and more people from working class backgrounds went to colleges, they learnt to Morris dance at college. And that was the reason, I believe, in my own theory, I believe that was the breakthrough for working class people like me to be involved in Morris dancing. Because it was largely a province of the college kids. Oxford and Cambridge, definitely. The Cambridge Morris Men is very much a college type run club. And so's the Morris Ring, or was.
So different than the impression I had. Yeah.
Right.
that
So
makes sense.
certainly that was the case. So the late 60s into the 70s were when people of my generation and my class
Yeah.
became interested.
Right. That makes sense.
And there was a huge growth in Morris at that time. We were pretty early,
Yeah.
being a team that started in 1971, something like that.
Yeah,
We were pretty
okay.
early.
Okay.
And so we danced wherever we could, whenever we could, all locally in the South Hampshire area.
So was there something when you saw Morris dancing or got to participate in it for the first time, was it a sense of, ooh, I really love this, I found my place, or was it everyone's doing it
Eventually,
right now. Why not? This
eventually.
is fine. Yeah.
It was friendship that got me into the Morris.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That was the first real motivator, was being with friends
Yeah.
and doing something together.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a lifelong socialist.
Yeah.
And for me, one of the strengths of the Morris is not 6 individuals dancing, it's one team dancing together.
Yes.
That's, for me,
Yeah. That's the heart of it.
it's the heart of it.
Yeah.
Plus,
Yeah.
the exhilaration you get from leaping and
Yeah.
all that,
Yeah.
being together, that feeling of anacrusis, that feeling of when you go back to jump, stick, and make that movement before you make the first movement into the first crossing figure, for instance, where you're all up, you're all in the air, and you're all leaning. You have to go forward.
Yeah.
That's the strength. That's the wonder for me. I watch some Morris teams now, and I just don't see that.
Right. Yeah.
But that's by the by. I can only be influenced by showing him how to do it, and I can't show him how to do it anymore.
Right. Right.
So that's that's my motivation. And so right from the very beginning, I became a leading member of it. And then, as I said, I married my first wife, and up until I got married, or after I got married, I was working in a factory. I was a sheet metal worker. I was some skilled sheet metal worker welder, believe it or not.
Wonderful. Yeah.
I used to build fire engines.
Oh my goodness. That takes some skill.
So
Yeah.
anyway, but I was looking around, and I was going to parties with some of my elderly colleagues at work who were 65 and leaving, and there I was at 24, and I went 65 minus 24. No, I'm not going to do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So we cobbled together an idea, and I went on a government-sponsored course to Highbury College in Portsmouth on work study. And I used to take the train we were living in Brockenhurst, in the New Forest then. I used to take the train from Brockenhurst to Portsmouth every day and back. And I loved it.
I bet.
And I was on that course it wasn't that long. I think if it was 4 months, it wasn't much longer than that, I don't think. And then I started applying for jobs.
What were you studying?
I did work study at the college, which is not very liked by many people now because it's time and motion and stuff like that.
Oh, gotcha.
Principles of easy movement. It also is critical thinking as well, and critical analysis. I've been an analyst all my life.
Analyst.
Because I became a computer analyst later, but that's another story.
Okay.
So I did. I got the qualification after doing this, and I started looking for jobs, and I had two choices. I either looked in East Anglia for singing, or the Cotswolds area for Morris. I was joyful when I got an interview for a job at Smith's Industries in Cheltenham, but I didn't get the job, so I was disappointed with that. And then the following week, I got an interview for Oxfordshire County Council, and I got the job eventually working for Oxfordshire County Council, and I started work there on our first wedding anniversary.
Oh wow!
I got married on the 1st of April.
Oh gosh.
To Annie.
Yeah.
So I moved to Oxfordshire. I lived in Bicester, in Oxfordshire, for a short period of time in a house that the county let me rent from them. It was actually the old police station.
Oh my!
It was an amazing house, absolutely amazing, huge. We only used 3 rooms. The hallway was almost as wide as, well, from that wall to me,
Wow.
the hallway,
Oh my.
with coat hooks, huge metal coat hooks on the side. It was obviously the police came in the front door and hung their stuff up on the stuff.
Right.
Because we never used the front door because there was a side door that we used.
Yeah.
But it was the old police station.
Oh my.
And we used to get people knock on the door. Can we spend the night in the cells, mate?
Oh! and were there still cells there? In the house?
Unless they were down at the back originally, there were some really grotty places down the back. We didn't go in very often.
Right.
But so I was there, and of course I was made up because Bicester is only 3 miles, less than 3 miles from Bucknell.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And the first night I was there on my own, I got in my car and I drove to Bucknell, and I went to the pub in Bucknell, the Trigger Pond.
Yeah.
And I had far too many beers. And I drove home. I went to bed and I drove to the new job the next day. My wife was still in Hampshire then because she was teaching,
Yeah.
and she was going to wait to leave her job until the end of
Finish
the
school year.
So I'd only been there a week, and there was a knock on the door. What? Another one? Somebody else asked me. Went to the door, and there was a friend of mine who was from a folk club in Bournemouth, who was a good mate with my singing partner Helen, and his parents lived in Bicester. And John Dowell became the director of the Sydney Folk Festival.
Oh my goodness! Wow. Wow. And
So
you had
John
no
and I
idea he had family connections.
I had no
in
idea he
Bicester?
had family connections in Bicester. Anyway,
Oh, my.
we went out on the town and did a pub crawl and everything. Anyway, but that was that's just giving another connection back to Bicester.
Yeah.
And then when I started working for Oxford County Council, I had only been there 2 days, and I was called into the boss's office and he said, "We're subcontracting you to Banbury Borough Council for the next year. You're going to work in Banbury. You're still going to come back to the office on a weekly basis, but you're going to be in an office in Banbury looking after all the incentive schemes and stuff that we have running in Banbury for Banbury Borough Council."
Wow.
So I was ensconced in a beautiful building which is still there called Trelawney House in Bicester, in Banbury, just down on South Bar. And it's still there. Everything else around it's been knocked down, but the house is still there. Place is still there. Anyway, it was the offices of the environmental department of Banbury Borough Council who I was subcontracted to, and I did my work there. And I started while I had the opportunity of visiting all the villages that had Morris traditions.
Oh, of course, because you're right in the heart of it. Yeah.
Right. So, going back to the time when we were still in Bicester, I made contact with Oxford City Morris and started dancing with Oxford City Morris. Went on there on the 25th anniversary of the Oxford-Bonn twinning. Bonn and Oxford are twin cities.
Okay.
And we went and danced in Bonn as Oxford City Morris. And we danced with a group called the Brook and Bracker Tracking Group, who were a group of exiled Silesians.
Oh my!
And we got on very well. Anyway,
Wow.
so I started dancing with Oxford City, and we had a great. He was a very knowledgeable man. Roger Jenkins, his name was. He was a very knowledgeable Morris dancer, and he'd been at Oxford University, and he was a solicitor in Oxford, and he was the foreman of Oxford City Morris, and I learned lots from him. And I was but in between times we were living in Bicester, but we bought a house in Banbury because I was working there.
Yeah.
My wife was working there. By then she was working in the tax office in Banbury.
Okay.
So we were living in Banbury. Well, Banbury and Oxford are quite some distance apart, really.
Okay.
And so I used to drive down to Oxford and back again, and it seemed every time I did it, it was either pouring with rain or foggy.
Oh no.
So I got really fed up with this. I was like,
Yeah.
okay. And I was beginning to believe or disbelieve in Morris dancing Morris teams dancing as many traditions as they could dance. I was beginning to believe that you should only dance one tradition, as the old teams did.
And what was your thinking?
Well, my thinking was that I would start a team and teach one tradition which I hadn't yet decided what it was.
Why were you thinking focusing on one tradition? Was
Because I
perhaps the way
thought
to
that
go?
I thought that if you dance a blending in the dance, then followed it with a longer dance, most of the people watching wouldn't know the difference. I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Similarly, and I think that devalues the essence of the traditions.
Yeah.
That was what I thought I
Yeah.
was coming to. Anyway, at that time, my first wife started teaching English as a second language at the local technical college, and got very friendly with a guy by the name of... No, that come back to me too.
Okay.
And I said to her, do you think we could start an evening school class on Morris dancing at the college? She said, oh, that's a good idea. I'll ask Brian Little.
Okay.
I'll ask Brian Little. And he thought it was a great idea. So, on the 26th of April, 1973,
Wow.
I ran the first class. No, sorry, 1974.
Okay.
1974, I ran the first class of Morris dancing in the octagonal room at the college at Banbury. Wonderful octagonal room.
Yeah.
Who did we get to come along? By then, I was ensconced in the local folk scene, and I'd met John and Chris Leslie. More about Chris Leslie later. And some of the other people at the folk clubs area, and they came along, and I started teaching. I started teaching Headington because it was the easiest thing for me to start teaching.
Tradition. Yeah.
As a beginning tradition.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I'm only interrupting because I was doing my own thing and then I was listening and realizing that this is a lot of really important history and good history, but he's got a long way to go in terms of just Morris in England before even mentioning Marlboro. And it's 20 minutes of 2, and
Okay.
I've got a rehearsal.
Got it.
So you may
Okay.
need to do me on another day. You could even do
Or-
this evening
or
or
we'll do a
tomorrow after my
Part 2.
rehearsal
We'll do
or
you and
whatever.
then do a part 2 and then okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank
Okay,
you.
well, anyway,
great.
so we'll cut
Okay.
that a little bit shorter.
Okay.
And like the 5th week or third or 5th week, this guy walked into the room, and his name was Brian Shepherd,
Yeah.
and he was an Adderbury born and bred. Adderbury's only 3 miles south of Banbury.
Okay. Yeah.
I had no inclination of walking into Adderbury and trying to start a Morris team, although I'd been there and walked around the village and had dreams.
Yeah.
I didn't have that much balls to do that.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anyone there. Anyway, Brian walked into the thing, and he said, I'm a new Morris dancer with Moulton Morris in Northamptonshire.
Okay.
I didn't know that there was a Morris tradition in Adderbury until recently. Why don't we move your class to Adderbury?
Wow. And this begins a whole chapter.
And that begins the whole
Right.
chapter of
And
Of
you
me
are
in
the
Oxfordshire.
founding member of
Brian and I were
Adderbury.
founding members of
Adderbury
Adderbury Morris.
Okay.
And again, to sort of cut it short, after the first year, at the first AGM, we had a number of rows that meant that 3 of them left. Brian and 2 others left and formed the Adderbury Village Morris.
Okay.
And I stayed on with my team, which is
Okay.
still in existence today, as of the Village Morris, but much reduced from what they used to be.
Okay.
So anyway,
So
that,
they did Adderbury Village Morris,
they do.
or just
Well, again, getting technical. The tradition in Adderbury was collected by 2 people. Cecil Sharp being one, and the old foreman, William Walton, of the Adderbury Morris, was introduced to Cecil Sharp by a lady by the name of Janet Blunt. Sharp and Blunt.
Okay. Oh,
Okay. Okay, so,
couldn't plan that, yeah.
but the dances were started to be collected in the village by Janet Blunt in 1916. And she with some other people from the what was then the English Dance Society, but it was before the EFDSS.
Mm-hmm.
The EFDSS was put together as the Dance Society and the Song Society as two different entities.
Right, okay,
And Cecil Sharp was a leading member of the Song Society,
right.
and got more and more interested in dance as it went on. Anyway, Janet Blunt collected the dances that she collected. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly how many it was originally. I think I want to say 19, but it might be less. Sharp collected 5 dances when William Walton went to London, went to Hampstead to meet Sharp, and stayed with his daughter in London. He was 81 at the time.
Oh my.
And taught Sharp and also taught Blunt. So we had 2 sets of collections which differ significantly.
Okay.
So when Brian and I first got together, we went back through the original manuscripts from Sharp, which were at Clare College in Cambridge,
Yeah.
and the original manuscripts of the Blunt, which were in Cecil Sharp House, which
Okay.
is a story in itself.
Yeah.
And we went through it and we worked out, knowing enough about Morris and our experience, although we were both quite, I'd only been down for 4 years,
Yeah.
Brian less. We worked out how we were going to do each dance.
Wow.
And then we took that, and that's what we taught to the team.
Okay.
And we practiced for a year before we danced out, because it was exactly the Saturday, the year following, that we danced out for the first time in the village.
Wow.
So that was 1975.
Okay.
As I said, the 3 guys left and formed the Adderbury Village Morris,
Okay.
but only used the Janet Blunt manuscripts as an interpretation.
Ah. Okay.
We carried on doing what Brian and I had worked out and what Hyde worked out.
Right.
We also converged. We also changed because I wanted my team to be the best. I made sure they were best. I made certain changes like slowing down the music,
Yeah.
changing some of the steps to make the steps and the transitions better and easier,
Yeah.
and giving rules about the way you did things. So you learnt the basic rules, then you learnt the bits that were over and above those. The exceptions. You learnt the rules, then you learnt the exceptions.
Right.
So you could all put it together as one coherent set of dances.
So every team kind of needs to have the holder of the vision of that tradition.
You have to have
sort
that
of
philosophy.
Keep you true to what your style is
Yeah,
going to be.
yeah.
It sounds like you were setting that.
Yes.
So we refer to the 2 teams correctly. You said Adderbury Village.
Adderbury
was
Village
using
Morris
the
Men,
Janet's Blount.
using Janet Blunt's
And
manuscripts.
your team
My
referred
team
to
is-
itself as what name?
The Adderbury Morris Men.
Okay.
I added one word when we started. We
Okay.
were called Adderbury Morris Men before that, and I changed it to the Adderbury Morris Men.
Okay.
So there.
Perfect. Okay.
And we used. They changed their after 18 months or more. They changed their costume to a different costume,
Yeah.
which again is a whole different story in itself. Have you ever heard of the film The Way of the Morris?
No.
Well, The Way of the Morris is a film made by Tim Plester, whose father was an original Morris. His uncle and father were original Morris dancers in the village.
Oh.
But he was more associated. Although Tim is a good friend of mine, he was associated with the village
The
team.
village team. Yeah.
And but they cooked up. No, I said no. I shouldn't say this. I want to say it one day. They cooked up the story that the team died in the village because the young men went to war and were all killed. That is slightly true, but not true.
Okay.
There were a team of boys in the village in 1908 who danced until about 1915, very infrequently, through the school, and they were taught by a woman who lived in the village, a young woman, 21-year-old woman who lived in the village. They were taught from Cecil Sharp's first Morris book.
So he was referring to World War One,
He was
the Great War.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
And the bulk of that team went away to war, and
Yeah.
4 of them were killed.
Okay.
So they didn't come back and dance Morris, but
Right.
it didn't. Nothing happened again after the World War. After the World War, until we started again in 1974.
Oh,
So there was
wow.
still a
big
huge
gap.
gap. There was
Yeah.
nothing,
Okay.
and no one was alive. Well, say no one was alive. Brian reckoned he met a guy who I never met, who knew about it, but I never met him.
Yeah.
But that's another story. So again, it's very, very complicated. We're getting complicated things about Adderbury now, which I don't really want to get into in relation to Marlboro, obviously.
Sure.
In 1979, I was urged by a couple of people to revive the Morris in Kirtlington.
I was going to ask what your relationship to Kirtlington was as well. Okay. Great.
So I taught some Morris at Sidmouth, which was teaching basically Morris from Adderbury, Bucknell and Kirtlington.
Mm-hmm.
And created a fourth Morris tradition, which is geographically in the middle of that, based on the styles that existed in those other 3. And that was Dunn's Tew Morris, which is another story.
Okay.
Anyway, so I'd been down to, and a couple of guys who danced with Adderbury also danced with Kirtlington.
Okay. Sorry, I was just
And
writing down Dunn's Tew. And
Yes, and it's important
D-U-N-S.
there's a space between the two.
It's D-U-N-S.
D-U-N-S.
Second word T-E-W.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
So, as I said, a couple of the guys who danced on Adderbury also danced on Kirtlington.
Okay.
Because when I started teaching the Kirtlington, Len and Barbara Berry, Len was a local Scouts master, and they were Len Berry was the Scout master, and they were in a singing group called the Portway Pedlars. The Portway is an ancient road that goes through Kirtlington
Oh, okay.
and
yeah.
crosses the Icknield Way
Yeah.
north of the town.
Yeah.
So Portway is one of the old transport roads. Anyway, so I'd been trying to persuade Len for some time that we should get something going in the village. But then Paul Davenport, a guy from Doncaster, believe it or not, got interested in it and started teaching Kirtlington to his team and came up with their interpretation of the dances, of 5 dances.
Wow.
And we sat down and we pored over that, and we decided to start, and that was the basis of me teaching the Kirtlington Morris, or
Okay.
the men and boys that Len got together as a team, and I started teaching them in '79.
Okay.
And they danced out, because I didn't dance with them at the beginning, I just was their teacher.
Okay.
And they danced 6 dances at the revived Lamb Ale
Yes.
in 1980.
Kirtlington Lamb Ale. Yeah.
In 1980.
Okay.
And then Kirtlington went off and they did their thing, and I went back to Adderbury and did my thing. I got involved in other things as well, but that's another story. So there were 2 teams in North Oxfordshire.
Can I ask a question?
Sorry.
Can I ask a question? I'm thinking that we have a really nice photo in our collection of you standing and talking with Tony.
Yes,
And I think
in
you're in
Kirtlington.
Kirtlington.
I am,
Kid.
yes. Because that's
So
when
did Kirtlington actually come over to the
Yes.
Marlboro Ale at one point?
1990.
And did Adderbury ever come over to the
2005.
Ale? Oh, okay. All right. So we'll come back around
Yes.
to that. Okay.
So after about 3 years of Adderbury and Kirtlington being separate, and they still are, Ian Harris, who was then foreman of Kirtlington, squire of Kirtlington. No, he was foreman of Kirtlington that time. Foreman of Kirtlington. Len was the squire. Said to me at one Adderbury practice, "Why don't you start coming down to Kirtlington and dance?" I said, "Do you mind?" He said, "No, of course not. I dance with Adderbury and Kirtlington. Why shouldn't you?"
Yeah.
So I started dancing with Kirtlington.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And of course, you know who an famous ex Kirtlington dancer is?
Rhett Krause.
Yes, who I first met in
1981?
80,
Did
no.
he say when he was over
Well,
there? Somewhere in the early 80s.
No, it was the 70s.
Oh,
Because he
was it?
came
Okay,
over.
okay.
He came over to finish part of his training at Oxford.
Oh.
And Tony
Who knew?
said to him, "Go and find out about Kirtlington Morris."
Yeah.
And I met Rhett
Wonderful.
at that time.
He
and we
spoke
became-
very
and we
fondly
became
in his interview
very,
about
very good friends.
dancing with Kirtlington for a year.
We became very, very good friends.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop for a moment. We
Okay.
have to decide what we're going to do because it's almost 2 o'clock and we either continue talking with
Can I
Tim
go a little further before I did that? But okay.
or because we don't want to short change Jan,
Right. But
or we can continue.
we've still got some time before we switch
Yes,
over.
7 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so Kirtlington came in 1990. It was their first tour outside of England. It was a roaring success.
Oh, good.
It
Yeah.
changed my life forever.
Yeah.
Did you meet Jan?
I'd met Jan before
Okay.
at workshops I'd done at Sidmouth,
Yeah.
but not quite like the same way we did at Marlboro.
Yeah. Well, this sounds like the perfect place
So
to
that was,
pause and say we're going to start part 2 with "There's Jan."
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Should I stop?
So yeah, hit black square right there.